The information and views expressed by our host or guests on the Unlock Potential podcast are their own, and not a substitute for professional medical or fitness advice. Always consult with qualified healthcare or fitness professionals before starting any new exercise program or making changes to your current routine.
Pain doesn't necessarily have to do with the amount of tissue damage in the area. It has to do with the current amount of tissue damage and the past times that we have ignored that tissue damage being an amplifier for that situation. And then the pain and the emotion and the amplification that we experience will adjust how hard we are capable of pushing towards any particular goal, potentially leading to injury or a change in our goal.
Hello and welcome to Season 2 of Unlock Potential. I'm Brian Delaney. Our focus this season is fitness. I'll be joined by Dr. Duvall, who's going to guide us through his protocol for getting into your best shape so we can live our best lives and serve others well.
Welcome back to Season 2 of Unlock Potential. This is Episode 6, where we're going to discuss irritation, injury, and pain. In our last episode, we talked about the normal breakdown and repair process that our body goes through on a regular basis to help make us more capable and more helpful for others. Today, we're going to talk about how our human bodies experience that breakdown and repair process so that we can start to find ways in which to help it go right, and we can start to find ways in which we may get off track and lead to worse problems in the future. You can see here, we've got another diagram of the connective tissue. This is a little larger here, where we have a few additional breakdown and repair features. The red up top and down below represents blood supply, which is going to bring healing, healthy tissue to the area. We've got the black lines, which represent the connective tissue. We've got the brown squiggles here, which represent broken areas that are undergoing that inflammatory repair process. We've got red lines in here, which represent the nerves that sense damage and repair process in the area. We've got green lines that represent the nerves that sense movement in the area. And we've got these blue arrows here that surround each of those inflammatory processes, which represent the tension that your body creates around a repair. As our body goes through that inflammatory and repair process, it creates tension around the area in order to protect us from moving and creating more damage before the repair is completed. We experience that as stiffness or tightness within the musculature. As we're going through the inflammatory process, we'll also start to experience some soreness in the area. That's a negative, uncomfortable feeling as we're moving our body. And so we'll have a combination of stiffness and soreness while our tissues are going through a repair process. Now, it's important that we have movement occur because the movement is what helps us clear old inflammation out of the area. And so by engaging in that movement, we have a risk of moving in a way that creates more damage, and we have a way of moving that helps us sweep the repair process along. And so when we feel tight areas, it's important that we don't try to reduce that protection by pulling on those tight areas. What we want to do is move around those tight areas in order to help that inflammation pass on. Now, when we feel mostly tension and not much soreness, it's important that we get a lot of movement to get more healing energy into the area. You'll notice the blood supply is a little bit away from the damage, and the tension of the tissue surrounding it will prevent fresh blood from getting in there. And so when we start moving around the area, that's going to help get that blood into that tissue. Now, as the blood, meaning white blood cells, salt, and water, fill up the area, we will notice the tension, but also soreness as there's extra inflammation. And so you'll notice in the Stay Active method, when we get to it in the future, is that we have different protocols for when we mostly feel stiffness and for when we mostly feel soreness. All of these things are occurring throughout our body on a regular basis, but we're not always feeling stiff and always feeling sore. Sometimes we just feel peaceful or comfortable. And what's happening there, these green and red lines, the movement sensation and the damage sensation, come through to the spinal cord, and the strongest signal is the one that gets up through to our mind. And so when we have a lot of movement and not a lot of damage, the movement itself feels really good and we keep up with it. If the movement itself is starting to create a lot more damage, the damage sensation gets stronger and eventually breaks through to where we start to feel more and more discomfort with the movement. Now, at the same time, if we have very little movement at all, even the smallest amount of damage sensation will be the stronger signal and get through. So one of the key pieces of Stay Active method is that we get moving and we keep moving, and we use that movement to start to find what ways feel more comfortable and go that way, and what ways feel less comfortable and start to alter away from those directions. So full rest of not moving does not help us determine which movements are good for us and which ones create more soreness. So the breakdown and repair process, known as insult and inflammation, is occurring throughout our body all of the time, and only occasionally will we start to notice the stiffness and soreness that's associated with that. And that stiffness and soreness we term irritation. Now, that irritation, stiffness, and soreness will guide our activity. And it's important that as we choose exercise, that we set appropriate goals. Because an injury is not about just the tissue damage. It's not just about the stiffness and soreness that we feel, but it's about those symptoms and their impact on us achieving a goal. There are often times where people have a lot of damage, but are still achieving all of their goals and would never say that they have an injury. And there are other times where people have very, very little damage, but are not achieving their goals and might claim that they have an injury. And so the goal setting that we choose for exercise should both allow us to be aware of the irritations that we have, and by adjusting our goals up and down, we can adjust the amount of irritation that we experience so that we can best perform ourselves now and later and tomorrow and the month after and decades down the road. Now, there are times where we want to accept some of that stiffness and soreness on our way to that goal. And as we accept that on our way to that goal, we are storing in our memory center the amount of discomfort that we put up with on the way to that goal. There are times where that memory, having been stored away, will be triggering to the sensation that we have in the future. And so that memory can elicit an amplification or a downregulation of the irritations that we feel. And so pain doesn't necessarily have to do with the amount of tissue damage in the area. It has to do with the current amount of tissue damage and the past times that we have ignored that tissue damage being an amplifier for that situation. And then the pain and the emotion and the amplification that we experience will adjust how hard we are capable of pushing towards any particular goal, potentially leading to injury or a change in our goal. So to describe that a little bit farther, I may have in the past ignored a lot of damage in order to achieve goals that I was setting. Now, as I ignored all of that damage, I got more and more and more breakdown without allowing the repair process to complete. And so that gets stored in my memory center, because as I'm going through that process, if those situations get worse and worse and worse, eventually I'm not able to achieve my goals. And as I'm not able to achieve my goals, I feel incredibly limited. And so the amount of damage that I incurred followed by not achieving my goals gets stored in my memory center. So that years later, when I start using those tissues again, and they send even little impulses up through to my awareness, my memory and emotional center will amplify those things. And the amplification will increase my pain and will decrease my motivation to drive towards that particular goal. So I might have a 3 out of 10 tissue damage awareness that I ignore. I might have a 5 out of 10 tissue damage that I ignore, which then leads to a 7 out of 10 tissue damage, which I ignore, all to achieve my goals until eventually I'm 9 out of 10, but ignoring it. And so years in the future, as I start to use that tissue again, my body is going to start to turn 1 or 2 or 3 out of 10 tissue damage, amplify it to that 9 out of 10 in order to get me to back off, in order to get me to slow down so that I don't push too hard again the next time. And so major times in which I ignored tissue damage can get stored in my memory, and later on, small amounts of tissue damage can trigger that amplification and prevent me from doing what I'm still capable of in the future. Now, the solution to irritation is that we go back to the last episode and we say, hey, what do I need in order to heal from that insult and inflammation? I need hydration, and I need easy movement in order to move the inflammation out of the area, and I need enough time to repair all of those tissues. If I'm experiencing pain, what I need to do is calm the emotional center. As I calm the emotional center, I can start to bring that amplification in line with the actual tissue damage. And to calm the emotional center, what we actually do is we slow the breath. As we slow the breath, it calms the emotional center, and we are able to better discern what actual tissue damage we have now and what was an amplification. So to heal from irritation, we go back to heal the regular tissue damage of insult and inflammation. To normalize our pain, we focus on slowing the breath in order to calm the amplification. And then in order to help our injuries, we need to adjust appropriate goals as we move through our exercise and as we move through our daily life. So irritation is stiffness and soreness. Injury is stiffness and soreness that prevents us from achieving a goal. And pain is an emotional amplification based on past times in which we had ignored those situations. Today's episode took us through the normal human experience of what we feel as we're going through a healing and repair process. Next, we're going to take you into another style of exercise that we call flexibility to determine how we actually heal these tissues and calm that nervous system so we can reduce our pain. And then in future episodes, we're going to talk about the long-term implications of that ignorance, not just on our pain from memory and emotion, but also from a tissue level, what that looks like as we try to repair in the future.
Check out the official Unlock Potential store, where inspiration meets style. Explore our exclusive collection of gear inspired by the transformational messages straight from our Unlock Potential podcast. From trendy apparel that embraces the power of positivity to accessories that fuel your motivation. We've got something for every go-getter. Spread the messages of empowerment, energy, and motivation that you get from the Unlock Potential podcast by grabbing your gear today.
Yeah, exactly. So you can see here in the diagram that we've got the damaged area and we've got the area beside it that's still very healthy. Well, using this area is very necessary to continue the healing process here. And so by automatically shifting what and how we're doing things, we can challenge this area and leave this area to continue healing. And so we listen to the symptoms, we automatically adjust how we're doing it in a way that promotes healing, both of the current actual inflammatory process and the memory and emotional center in the brain, so that that movement pattern gets lined up with good, healthy, safe movement, as opposed to more injury and irritation. You just got to push through.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Unlock Potential. For exclusive content, make sure to subscribe to our Patreon. Follow us across all socials at @TheBrianDelaney and visit our website at thebriandelaney.com to shop our gear and see what's coming up next.